Imagine asking an AI how to build a nuclear bomb. Of course, it proudly says no and lectures you on safety. Now you take the same question, wrap it in a love poem to plutonium, and suddenly the answer starts leaking out. This isn't a sci-fi plot. It comes from a real study called Adversarial Poetry, testing how poems can jailbreak large language models. Researchers took dangerous prompts about nuclear weapons, cyberattacks, even biological threats, then turned them into weird metaphorical poetry. They tested 25 major AI models. On average, poetic prompts slipped past guardrails about 62% of the time. Some models almost completely caved in, answering 90% of these poetic attacks, including on nuclear and cyber topics. The team was so worried they refused to publish the exact poems, only the statistics, methods, and a general description of their approach. So here's the uncomfortable question. If a poem can jailbreak AI, what exactly are we supposed to censor or control? The model, the training data, the prompts, or something stranger? Are we drifting toward trying to censor knowledge itself? In this video, we'll start from that poetic jailbreak, then connect it to data, Google Translate history, and Kant versus utilitarianism. Think of this as a tour of AI safety, censorship, and philosophy, guided by poetry and a slightly nervous narrator. Let's start with the study itself. What exactly did these researchers do to turn poems into digital lockpicks? The project is called Adversarial Poetry. Adversarial, because the poems are designed to fool, not to move the model. They began with a benchmark set of harmful prompts. How to build bombs, hack systems, manipulate people, even spread biological agents. Normally, modern models are trained to refuse those. They give safety messages, disclaimers, and sometimes very long lectures on ethics. The twist was this: keep the underlying meaning, but rewrite everything as strange, broken, metaphor-heavy poetry. No explicit nuclear bomb words. Sometimes no clear verbs. Just images like metal seeds of unnatural suns and enriched, dusty cities. They crafted some poems by hand, others using templates that automatically convert harmful requests into poetic, fragmented language. Then they fired these poetic prompts at 25 language models, including both open-source projects and big commercial systems. On average, about 62% of the time, the models dropped their guard and provided harmful, detailed information. Some models were almost completely compromised, answering over 90% of poetic attack prompts, even in nuclear and cyber categories. Even automatically generated poems, not just carefully handcrafted ones, significantly increased jailbreak success compared to normal phrasing. In other words, the safety system wasn't understanding moral meaning. It was pattern matching specific phrases and obvious surface forms. When the same dangerous intent came dressed in metaphors and broken grammar, the safety layer essentially said, "This looks artsy, probably fine." The researchers flagged this as a warning. If you rely only on surface filters, poetry becomes a universal skeleton key. But that raises another issue. If we know this is possible, should we block the method, the model, or the underlying knowledge itself? To understand why just censoring data is not a simple answer, we need to visit an older story. Google versus IBM machine translation. Long before neural translators, IBM built systems using carefully curated parallel corpora, like UN documents and European Parliament proceedings. The data was clean, formal, and high quality. Basically, the linguistic equivalent of a perfectly edited official textbook. Then Google arrived with a much uglier strategy. Scrape the web, grabbing anything vaguely bilingual, including blogs and half-broken translations. From a traditional perspective, that looked insane. The internet is full of mistakes, slang, spam, and wild stylistic variation. But for statistical models, sheer volume and diversity turned out to matter more than perfectly sanitized, textbook-like purity. Over time, Google's messy, gigantic corpus let it handle idioms, slang, chatty language, and niche topics better than cleaner rivals. The lesson was uncomfortable. If you only train on sanitized language, your system becomes polite but clueless about real-world speech. Now apply that to AI safety. If we aggressively delete data about war, crime, manipulation, or hate, what happens? We might reduce some misuse, but we also train models that don't understand those domains deeply enough to argue against them. A model that has never seen real extremist language will struggle to detect it, rebut it, or warn users about it. So sanitize the data sounds safe on paper, but at scale it can produce AI that is both limited and dangerously naive. That is our first tension. We want safer models, yet we also need systems that grasp how the ugly parts of reality actually work. Behind that tension sits a much older philosophical argument than AI itself. Immanuel Kant versus the utilitarians. Immanuel Kant cared less about outcomes and more about principles. For him, morality begins with universal rules and human dignity. His famous question was simple: can the rule behind your action be adopted by everyone without contradiction or absurdity? Applied to knowledge, a Kantian might say that hiding true information treats citizens like children, not autonomous rational adults. Even if the information is dangerous, the duty to respect rational agents and truth itself weighs heavily in Kant's framework. On the other side, utilitarians like Bentham and Mill focus on overall happiness and suffering, the net balance of consequences. From that angle, if publishing certain knowledge massively increases catastrophe risk, secrecy might be morally justified on balance. The adversarial poetry team clearly felt this tension. They published their findings but withheld the exact jailbreak poems. A Kantian critic might say you're withholding truth and treating the public as incapable of responsible, informed judgment. A utilitarian defender might answer that sharing those poems makes weaponization easier, so not sharing reduces expected harm overall. This is the heart of information hazards, situations where true information itself can cause or meaningfully enable serious harm. Nuclear physics, advanced biology, sophisticated malware techniques all sit inside this uncomfortable zone of potentially weaponizable knowledge. With AI, the question becomes brutally practical. When models expose such hazards, what exactly should we restrict and how far? For some, the answer seems obvious. Just censor the dangerous data and solve the problem directly at the root. Unfortunately, modern deep learning ignores that simplicity. Technically, that just is hiding a lot of almost impossible work. Since Geoffrey Hinton and others kicked off the deep learning boom, models stopped being readable programs and became gigantic numeric blobs. A modern large model may have hundreds of billions of parameters, each just a floating point weight, not a labeled fact or document. There is no neat nuclear bomb.knowledge file inside. You can open, read, and selectively delete paragraph by paragraph. The training data is worse for censorship. Trillions of tokens scraped from books, code, papers, and the very messy open web. Saying just remove the dangerous sentences is like saying just manually clean the entire internet line by line. Even if you could identify them, retraining or deeply editing the model every time you update a blacklist would cost a fortune. On top of that, knowledge in deep networks is distributed, smeared across many parameters and entangled with countless other concepts. Trying to surgically remove only the bad knowledge without breaking everything else is, today, almost science fiction. That is why, in practice, most governance targets a more reachable layer. What goes into the interface and what comes out. We add safety filters, policy checks, logging, and sometimes even human review around especially sensitive domains and use cases. But output-level control has a structural weakness. It plays defense against the most creative animal on Earth, human beings. Safety filters usually look for known bad patterns, certain keywords, phrasing, or topics that strongly correlate with high risk. Users, meanwhile, invent endlessly new ways to ask for the same thing. Jokes, roleplay, fictional stories, metaphors, and now poetry. Every time a new jailbreak trick appears online, companies rush to patch exactly that pattern until the next one arrives. It is classic cat and mouse. The rules stay fixed for a while, but humans can always step beyond the last known boundary. Adversarial poetry shows how wide that gap is. If danger is recognized only on the surface, creativity easily walks around it. So we face three hard truths. We can't truly censor data, can't surgically edit parameters, and can't fully tame prompts. That does not mean give up on safety. It means we need layered defenses and honest expectations for each safety layer's limits. Interestingly, the philosopher who famously hated poets, Plato, worried that poetry could destabilize the moral order of his ideal city. He wanted to ban most poets from his republic, arguing powerful images and stories could corrupt reason and public virtue. 2,400 years later, we are not banning poets, but we are debating whether their tricks can destabilize AI guardrails. The core question hasn't changed much. What kinds of stories and knowledge are too dangerous to circulate completely freely? With AI, that question becomes brutally practical. It is no longer about library shelves, but models deployed to millions of people. Censoring data too aggressively may give us polite but ignorant systems. Censoring outputs alone leaves infinite room for clever jailbreaks. Ethically, Kant reminds us to respect truth and autonomy. Utilitarians remind us not to ignore catastrophic downside risks. Technically, deep learning reminds us that neither just delete bad data, nor just patch the model is realistically simple. So where does that leave us? Probably with messy compromises, layered safety, transparency, and constant adjustment over time. For now, the best we can do is design systems assuming people will try to break them, sometimes for fun, sometimes for harm. That means monitoring high-risk uses, sharing research openly, and treating safety as a continuous process, not a one-time patch. It also means being honest. No combination of filters and policies will ever make AI completely safe or perfectly controllable. Between naive openness and total lockdown, there's still room to choose better defaults, smarter guardrails, and more accountable governance. In that space, philosophers, engineers, policymakers, and yes, even poets all still have something important to say. So here's my question for you. If a poem can jailbreak an AI, who should we be regulating first? The poets for writing clever prompts? The companies for deploying fragile models? Or ourselves for how we choose to use these tools? Let me know what you think in the comments, and maybe don't teach your favorite AI too many new poems tonight. This was Whatever Debate. Beyond the news, we switch on thinking, even when the questions arrive dressed as poetry.